In other news, a rapid study conducted by Stats SA on how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected businesses has revealed that 85.4% of businesses surveyed reported turnover below the normal range. 42.2% of the businesses said they were not confident that they had the financial resources to continue operating through the COVID-19 outbreak. So for more on this, we're joined by Karabo Mashugane, who is an SMME funding expert, and he's also the founder of 2020 Insight. Thank you very much for coming through, Karabo.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, so just very briefly, which industries are we talking about here?
It's basically across the board. The ones that you see most affected, for example, the tourism industry, as we all know, that people are not traveling anymore and things. So that has been badly hit. But even manufacturing, where I think the manufacturers said only about they're operating at about 10% of their capacity. So I think it's almost across the board, and we all have to start thinking, long term, that everybody keeps saying, you're getting funding or relief for 3 months or whatever. But the best case scenarios that we're hearing is that any vaccine will probably come into the market next year. And so we should expect a very sustained sort of environment where businesses is subdued, especially now as we get into the winter. I think the forecast for our infection rate of COVID in the country will top at about 1 million or so around September. Now, we have this panic right now with about 3,500 people that are infected. But, to try and imagine for a small business owner to think about what this country will be like when we have 1 million people infected, when all of us will probably know somebody or ourselves will be affected by this thing and know somebody who has passed away from it, that the level of fear is likely to increase. And so business is going to get extremely hard. And so, especially for small businesses that are thinking this is just a transitory thing and it's going to move, even as we, as the country start relaxing some of the lockdown regulations, you'll probably find that when we have the COVID infections flaring up, we will have some of those restrictions coming back. So it's going to make it extremely difficult to plan, extremely difficult to operate. And we all have to look at our businesses and really think about how we operate in an environment, assume that this environment is semi-permanent, and how do we then adjust our businesses and our operating structures to be able to cope. Mm-hmm. And also looking at how do we change maybe some of the services we offer to be more in line with what the market demands currently and not what the market demanded before.
So Karabo, in line with the stimulus package announced by the president, looking at small business development relief, there are sectors, as we are talking about, maybe the situation may be semi-permanent. So business will continue to operate subdued during post the COVID-19 and post the lockdown era. So as we'll be activating the economy in staggers, how will then one have a build-up of economic business operations in terms of starting small, medium term, and having a long haul?
Yeah, so we all keep saying small businesses are the key to job creation and driving the economic growth. But that really only applies where you have an economy that has high innovation. In a country like ours, I think we rank about 63 out of 129 countries in terms of innovation. And as a consequence of that, our small businesses in the country, and you can see this with regards to the policy the government has, tend to be more beneficiaries of economic growth rather than drivers of economic growth. So in an environment where people are not moving, people are not going out, people are not interacting with each other, it's extremely difficult to then focus on small businesses as a driver. We need to focus on large industries, on manufacturing, especially around the requirements for COVID-19. But we need to use that stimulus package, not necessarily directly. Yes, we can help the SMMEs to cope for the short term, but there's a limit to how much money you can keep pumping into companies that are not operational. So the key thing is that we have to revive industries and build industries that will then, on the back of that, start driving small business growth. If I give you an example, if you have a construction site and you have somebody who sells cooked food outside of the construction site, if that construction site is closed because nobody is building right now, you can give that person as much money as you want, but that business is not going to get revived until the construction sites come up again. And so our small businesses generally are geared towards that. So I think in the budget speech, and I think in the president's State of the Nation address, there was talk of investing in an innovation fund, setting up a 4IR commission, and that sort of stuff. So I think more reliance and more focus on the CSIR, for example, as avenues for innovation in the country, and coming up with new solutions that will then get massive funding behind them. The current situation is such that we can't have the survival of businesses as we know them in the country, as we become accustomed to them, as really the key focus area. We have to create an environment in which those types of businesses can then come up and provide services and close patches, etc., where big business maybe is not able to operate.
So besides innovation, currently businesses have actually been exposed to lack of walk-ins, but experiencing a lot of inquiries via telephone, WhatsApp, and so forth. What can businesses learn so that they can be able to throw forward the current model of doing business when it comes to online trading and so forth, or rather online business operations? Can they really adopt these strategic business operations and say that they can perhaps assimilate, and going forward they can also learn and infuse online shopping going forward?
Yeah, so some of the biggest beneficiaries of this virus have been Amazon and Alibaba, for example. And so a lot of small businesses have to start thinking about that in terms of how they deliver their services and changing their distribution sort of models, but also in terms of how you then manufacture. And the fact of employees having to work from home, irrespective of what business you have, is going to be the norm, at least in the short to medium term. So investing in technology is critical. Investing in also in your employees' ability to be able to access the internet, etc., and be able to operate from home is going to be key. And building those types of systems where, as a business owner, you're still able to monitor the productivity of your employees and the quality of what they produce, some of them from home. Because when they start getting sick, I mean, we saw the other day some of the companies where you have a flare of, they're still operating, but where you have a flare up of COVID infections and everybody has to be sent home. In some cases, some of your key employees might have to be quarantined, etc. So investing in them being able to operate remotely is going to be key, and then making sure that what you need on the ground, whether it's in your operations, in your factory, is really at a minimum. That's where I think that the drive has to be as a country. And unfortunately right now, because obviously international trade is also reduced, it's very difficult to import that equipment and that machinery. But as we start opening up, that has to be the key focus for the country, to say what is it that we can get into the country right now to be able to operate as smartly and as remotely as possible for businesses, and to really look at these business models. So all businesses really have to start relooking at their business models, especially small businesses, and making them leaner and focusing more on developing technology in the country.
Some sectors of the economy are going to have to start business on the back foot. And earlier I was speaking to Rangani Mbalati about, industries like the arts, where you're looking at actors, musicians and the likes who rely on gigs. And I mean, like before the lockdown, they had received deposits for people who had booked them. And then when the events were cancelled, they had to pay back those deposits. So you can imagine how they were set back in terms of having to pay back those deposits and having to wait until after the lockdown. But as you were mentioning, that the economy is going to be subdued going forward. So how do people make up for the shortfalls? And as they are on the back foot, they have now to break even. Are we even going to talk about profitability in the next 3 months in operating a sustained business model that is going to be affected by the babalas or the hangover of COVID-19 going forward?
Yeah, so I mean, you can, and the benefit of adopting technology is that it lowers your operating costs quite significantly. So what we have seen, I mean, you've seen some of the DJs coming up with these, they call them house parties, where they do, I haven't actually joined any of them, but apparently they run these parties and they DJ online, and it's video interaction with their audience, where normally you would expect that audience to be in a nightclub or something. Also, I've seen people running gyms remotely, where people are able to view the instructor and each other on and share their screens, and be able to create an online community that you actually feel like you're with these people, but it's remote. So a lot of that is going to have to happen. And I think entertainment specifically will have to move to that, because I don't see, at least for the next year and a half, a situation where we're able to fill up stadiums, where people, because even when the vaccines, for example, come out, best estimates are that probably, we're going to have production rates of about 600 million to 1 billion a year. So that means that we're still going to have years where the vaccine is available, but not everybody can get it. So probably for a couple of years, still we're going to have the situation where we cannot congregate in large numbers. And so people that depend on high volumes really need to adopt technology as a tool to engage with their audiences and be able to interact with them there. So I think it's just a universal sort of requirement and what everybody should have to start moving to.
Right. Thank you very much for making time for us. We are speaking here to Karabo Mashugane, who is an SMME funding expert, and he's also the founder of 2020 Insight, and of course talking to us about how this stimulus funding is going to operate, and will it be enough, and more so that we're talking about post-COVID-19 forecasting, how will business be sustained. Well, the